All right. What's up, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the Uprise MMA live show, where we talk everything there is about mixed martial arts, and in particular the UFC, some of the greatest fighters in the world, talking about those fights and also reflecting on the art form that is martial arts. And of course, if you look under my little picture there, you can see that I'm just a super fan of the MMA. Loved it since its inception. Have been watching fighters since then, and have really gotten into it, I'd say, in the last few years especially. But I've not just gone into it as a fan. I've also started training for the last year, and that introduces the other co-host of this show, which is Pete Panos, who's also my coach for mixed martial arts and the owner of Uprise MMA, but he himself is a martial artist, and I'll let him talk real quickly about his background in martial arts. So, Pete, take it away.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, man, just super excited to be here. Been doing martial arts almost 30 years now. Started as a young kid and just kept with it. It's been amazing to see the sport evolve, and just super excited to be here, be a part of the show. And yeah, I've been a coach 10 years now. I've had a gym, Uprise MMA, and yeah.
So what the really cool thing about doing the show, finally, we've been talking about it for a while, is look, I love doing this stuff. I love watching UFC and MMA in particular. I mean, UFC in particular, but I love mixed martial arts. I love talking about it. But I am no expert by any means. I'm just a fan. And so, of course, Pete brings the expertise, and that's kind of going to be what the show is going to be about. It's more me leveraging his expertise, and because you really want to hear what he's got to say, not me so much. So that's how it's going to work. Now, I'm also going to give you guys a little bit of the format and flow of the show. What we've got is we're going to choose a set number of topics each week to talk about that are relevant in what's going on in the sport of mixed martial arts right now. Today, we're starting off slow with just two topics, and the first of those topics is the Khabib versus Justin Gaethje fight, which everybody's talking about, everybody's excited about. And we're doing this in 5-minute increments. So we're going to start the timer, and once the timer rolls, we are going to go. And in particular, obviously, since Pete is a longtime coach, a master of mixed martial arts and all that, we're really going to dive into some of the technical details in terms of these fights and the style matchups and so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's kick it off. Khabib versus Gaethje. All right, so let's first talk generally. Pete, what are your thoughts on who you think is going to have the stylistic advantage?
I'm super excited about the fight, and I think I'm super excited, like most fans are, because of the style matchup, like you had said. To say who has the advantage, it's I mean, that would kind of determine the fight, in my opinion. I think we all know that Khabib's style is to kind of maul and smother and just relentless pressure, and Gaethje is a ferocious striker. So it's really going to be a style matchup. And can Khabib stay close to Gaethje and smother him and stay out of his power range, or is Gaethje going to be able to, land those strikes? And Gaethje's no slouch on the ground. He's a wrestler too. I don't think he's at the level that Khabib's at, but yeah, stylistically, it's a super exciting fight.
Now, Gaethje has talked at length about not only his wrestling background and how he's going to use that to, I think, keep Khabib at bay, or at least be able to somewhat stop the takedowns. But he's also talked about the leg kicks, and that's one of my favorite elements of Gaethje. Can you talk a little bit about his leg kicks, and in particular his calf kicks, and how those might play a role in the fight?
Yeah, the calf kick is a relatively new kick in martial art world. I mean, those of you that have trained or watched the sport, it was Jose Aldo would be chopping the leg of Uriah Faber and like chopping a tree. And because of the evolution of the sport and how athletes have gotten so much better at taking fighters down and eating a kick and then turning it into a takedown, they started kicking the calf. And Gaethje's perfected that. And it's just as effective. Basically, it hinders the lead leg, so you can't put weight on it. You can't take your shots. You can't punch as well. And Gaethje uses that very effectively, just destroying that lead leg, making fighters switch stances, breaking their base, making it difficult for them to shoot or put weight on it. You saw it yesterday in the fight. Some of you might have seen the Munoz fight, where Munoz was chopping the leg of Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar ended up winning the fight, but he definitely did a lot of damage to Frankie's leg, and you could tell it was bothering him throughout the fight.
Yeah, and I think we've been seeing that a lot with a lot of recent fights where a lot of fighters have been talking about how their leg has been damaged from those calf kicks or any type of
Yeah.
leg kicks. It's crazy. That's so fascinating to me because it's not something anybody would think about in a regular fighting situation. You usually go for the head or maybe sort of like a kidney or vital organ.
Yeah.
But the fact
I
that
think
these are
it's the repetition. It's like in a maybe a street fight, whatever, you're looking at a fight lasting 10 seconds, if that, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, where these high level fights are going 3 or 5 rounds, talking 15, 25 minutes. And that repetitive pounding of the calf or the quad over those rounds is what takes the toll. Usually not one kick, but they land 10 or 20 kicks on the calf or on the thigh, and it changes definitely the dynamics of the fight.
When I saw the Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson fight, I just thought Gaethje, and I think largely the MMA community felt that he just looked phenomenal. If that version of Gaethje, or even potentially a slightly even better, improved version of Gaethje shows up, I mean, I know it's so hard to make these predictions and whatnot. And you've seen Khabib, probably his last big fight was Dustin Poirier. I mean, do you have an inkling as to where you see the fight going, what you see Justin being able to do, or is this one of those situations where it's just too much of a toss-up?
Yeah, it's hard to, for me at least. I mean, it's hard to make a prediction on where I see the fight going. I can see where I think both fighters will try to take the fight, and that's pretty clear. I think most of us know Khabib's going to try to do what he does, which is maul him and stay on top of him and handcuff him down. And Gaethje's going to try to stay calm and throw his shots and land his punches and his kicks and avoid the fighting against the fence. I wouldn't even want to. And Khabib's a guy you never really want to bet against or second guess because his track record is self kind of proven. But I'm super excited about the fight because, again, like we said earlier, it's so stylistically interesting. I thought the Ferguson-Khabib fight would have been stylistically interesting, but after seeing Gaethje do what he did to Ferguson, that makes me even more excited to now see this new super fight of Gaethje and Khabib.
And kind of interesting, Dana White mentioned actually today that it looks like he's semi-confirmed that it looks like Tony Ferguson's going to be going against Dustin Poirier next, which should also be a really interesting fight. And last quick point before the timer runs out, Gaethje, I assume, is going to try and keep the fight in the middle away from the fence. What do you think his chances are of being able to pull that off?
Look, if the fight goes 5 rounds, I'd be shocked if he doesn't end up against the cage a good portion of the latter rounds. But I think it's all going to depend if his punches are landing. If he's able to stick Khabib a little bit as he's coming in and make him hesitant coming in, and he circles the cage well, he has a good chance of staying off the cage. He's a good athlete.
All right, awesome. So now I stopped the timer because our 5 minutes has elapsed, and now you can see this next topic, that our final topic for today, has come up, and it's talking about trash talking in MMA, so I'm going to go ahead and start that timer. Now, the reason why I think this was a good transition as well is, look, obviously Khabib is no trash talker. He is sort of the model athlete in terms of he's a role model for kids. The way he carries himself is just amazing and a true martial artist in that sense. But as we all know, he's been through one of the craziest, most dramatic fights of probably in the history of the UFC against Conor McGregor, where there was a lot of that, and there is still a lot of that. You, as a professional, as a martial artist, as a owner of a gym, and I know you try and preach your own philosophies as well to your students to make sure they're respectful and so on and so forth. What are your thoughts about trash talking at MMA? Does it have a place?
Yeah, that's interesting because as a coach, I'm not a big fan of it, although I do know that sometimes fighters trash talk, not only to get into the head of the fighter, the person they're fighting against, but sometimes psych themselves up to get themselves motivated for a fight. As a fan of the sport, I like it because it creates this good guy, bad guy. You get on one side of the fence or the other. It has a villain and a hero aspect that happens. So as a fan, it's exciting because it really makes it clear, like you either really want to see this guy lose or really want to see this guy win, and that brings a intensity level to it. As a coach, I because of the history of martial arts, and it's always been about respecting your opponent, respecting, being humble in victory and gracious in victory and humble in defeat. I think sometimes it can get a little too far. It can go a little too far, but it is exciting. Every fighter is so different. Every fighter is coming from a different place. And like I said earlier, I do see some fighters really do need to psych themselves up. You're going into war. You're going into a battle. You're going into a cage with another person who's there could potentially really hurt you. So sometimes fighters need to get themselves mentally prepared, and some fighters, that's how they do it. And then also the obvious reason, sometimes you can get into the head of your opponent.
You know, and I think as a fan too, but also as somebody who my goal is to practice to eventually consider myself a martial artist. This will probably be years from now, but
Right.
I love the sport. I have massive, my respect for UFC fighters is probably the greatest out of anybody in the world because of what they do. And so from that perspective, I really do, I feel kind of bad, to be honest, when I see the trash talking, because I don't feel like it's necessary. But then at the same time, right, I'm torn like you. It is entertaining. I have to say, like, I was so excited for the Conor McGregor-Khabib fight,
Yeah.
but I am torn. Now, I wanted to just use this to go back to a recent fight that was an amazing fight. It ended kind of quickly and a little bit unexpectedly, which was the Chito Vera versus Sean O'Malley fight. Now, Sean O'Malley is kind of that same breed. He definitely talks a lot of smack. He's really funny. I'm a big fan of him, and also because I think he's an amazing fighter. But when you hear them after the fact, there's two perspectives I'd want you to weigh in on. Number one, Chito Vera was I mean, it seems like he was upset. He didn't take too kindly to some of the things. He felt it was very disrespectful, and that's not his style, and I really respect him for that. But then I heard Sean O'Malley and his coach talk about it later, and their stance is, hey, if there's even a 1% chance that saying one of these outlandish things is going to throw that person off, especially when they're trying to hurt, Sean, and from what his coach said, trying to hurt my best friend, I'm going to do it. What are your thoughts on that stance?
I get it. I mean, at that level, they're all really good fighters. They all know how to grapple. They all know how to strike. They all know how to defend. So then the fight becomes mental. Like, how can I get an advantage over this guy? And look, everybody gets clipped once in a while and gets caught. But I'm not talking about those happen chances. I'm talking about big picture. And here you're talking about mental capacity and how can somebody maintain their focus, or can you break their focus? So if talking trash before a fight, during a fight, after a fight, leading up to potential another fight, if that's going to get into somebody's head and break them out of their game, then I get it. Sometimes, like with Khabib, I think it just did the opposite. It drove him to go into that fight with Conor with the mentality, there's no way I'm going to lose this fight. I won't let myself lose this fight as much as he's disrespecting me. So I think it backfired at some point on Conor. But it's a funny thing. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's going to continue. I think if anything, it's going to continue to grow, the trash talking, because I do think it promotes the league, it promotes the fighters, and they make more money, and it makes it more entertaining. More people want to tune in because there's a level of excitement there. I think the true martial art fans, the true MMA fans are going to watch it regardless if there's trash talking or not trash talking. But I think the fans on the outskirts or on the fence that watch sometimes but don't watch sometimes are going to be drawn into the fights when there's more of a higher stake and more trash talking and more on the table.
I think that's a fair point, and that's a perfect time to wrap it up because we just hit that 5-minute mark. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. That is the first round, the first go for Uprise MMA Live. Of course, that name coming straight from Pete's gym, Uprise MMA in Los Angeles. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining. We're going to be doing these shows live every week, and instead of 2 topics, we're going to be upping it to 5 topics, so we have more interesting things to talk about. So many cool things happening that we want to touch on. We got the Paulo Costa versus Israel Adesanya fight coming up. We got, obviously, Khabib, Gaethje, and a lot of other cool ones that are going to be scheduled. As I mentioned, Ferguson and Poirier is being discussed already. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we will see you in the next episode. Take it easy.